Okay, we're on now. Welcome back to Chamber Matters. This is Val Hale, President and CEO of the Utah Valley Chamber, and Neil.
This is Neil Smith right over here.
Neil's by my side, and we are so fortunate right now in our Policy Matters segment to have with us Dick Castner from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Dick, welcome.
Thank you.
Give us a little bit of information about your title and what you do for the U.S. Chamber.
Okay. Well, I am the Executive Director of the Western Regional Office out of Los Angeles and part of Congressional Affairs, and I do the legislative and political work for the Chamber in 5 states: California, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and Hawaii.
And it's a very important role. The U.S. Chamber is very involved politically, especially on the federal level. And the topic right now that is the hottest, and I think one of the most important for the U.S. Chamber and our chamber here locally and the state chambers, is that of immigration. Dick, kind of fill us in on where we are. You know, we had the bill that passed the Senate. What's it been, a month ago, and moved to the House. Tell us where we are with that right now.
Okay, well, with that particular bill, it is dead in the House. They've made very clear there that they are not going to take it up. But there are 5 bills that have micro-targeted individual aspects of immigration reform that have passed committees. And one more, the DREAM Act, that is slated to be heard in September. So the House is working its way through the issue, but they're doing it in a different way. Instead of one big bill, they're doing micro-targeting each individual aspect of immigration reform in an effort to move them piece by piece.
And explain to people, I'll have people say to me, well, why does business care so much about immigration? Why is it such a big deal? Can you explain to our listeners why it is a big deal that we have this immigration reform, that this take place?
Well, there are a lot of reasons just tied to us being a nation of immigrants that make it important. But for businesses specifically, one of the biggest problems, and it's hard to recognize when the unemployment rate is high, well, at least here in Los Angeles, if not in Utah, but we are desperately short of qualified workers, both at the low-skilled end of the spectrum and at the highest-skilled ends of the spectrum. And it's holding back our ability to grow substantially. It's worsening our budget deficit, and it's making it harder to pay for entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare. We need more workers who are paying into those systems so that people can draw benefits out of them. And the most logical place to look are people who really want to do this work, again, both at the high and low-skilled area, that come from other parts of the world.
Yeah, I attended a presentation the other day that was, I will admit, a little bit scary, and it talked about America's declining birth rate, and not just America.
Oh.
Europe is experiencing it in dramatic fashion, but we're not replacing ourselves as a population, and that bodes really poorly for the future because, as you mentioned, what's going to happen is we aren't going to have kids who, and so as our population lives longer, then you've got less people working to provide for more people, and it's a formula for disaster. The way to mitigate that is through immigration and bringing in immigrants that will help take these jobs, as you mentioned. It's a critical issue that I don't think people in our country realize is happening. It's coming quickly.
Well, we hear a lot of quite honestly, xenophobia out there, that these people are coming here to get free benefits and that. And if you talk to people, I've talked with Mexican officials, and they bemoan, for instance, the number of Mexicans that come up here, because the ones who come are the most motivated, the most entrepreneurial, the hardest working ones, and they leave and aren't contributing then to the Mexican economy. And likewise, at the high-skilled area, a third of every company that started up in Silicon Valley was started by an immigrant, a first-generation immigrant. So these people come here to work and to create wealth that benefits all of us.
Yeah, it really is an eye-opener when people really get the facts on this issue. Will you share with us where the Utah delegation stands on immigration? Pretty much, can you kind of give us, from your perspective, where each of them stands, and maybe tell our listeners what they can do to influence them, supposedly?
Well, quite honestly, in some cases, we don't know because they aren't saying. But in a couple, we have, your two senators, for instance, we have recorded votes on the Senate immigration bill, where Senator Hatch most assuredly voted for it and worked hard to get it passed, and Senator Lee voted against it. We are fairly sure, again, the House situation is kind of murky because we don't even have all of the bills that we're expecting to see yet. But in general, we are pretty certain that Congressman Matheson supports, at least in concept, reforming our immigration laws to cover the many areas, and we've only touched on one, the shortage of workers. There are other aspects of this that are very important, but we know where he is on it pretty well because he's been pretty vocal. Less so from Congressman Bishop, Stewart, and Chaffetz. We just are not as clear on where they stand. We hope that at the end of the day, whatever bill comes out of the House, they'll be able to support. And now, as to the rest of your question, how can your listeners help if you care about this issue? And quite honestly, it's an important enough issue that even if you disagree with the position that we at the U.S. Chamber and perhaps even the Utah Valley Chamber hold on it, that you weigh in with your members of Congress. Write to them, call their district offices. They are anxious to hear how their constituents feel about the matter. And this is the big issue of the year at the federal level. So if you're going to make one phone call or write one letter, do it on this.
I think that's a good point. I think so our listeners know where our chamber stands on this issue. Our chamber policy committee and our chamber board of directors voted unanimously to support the Utah Compact, which is a document that deals with immigration and dealing with immigration in a compassionate, reasonable manner. We also voted unanimously to send a letter to our delegation, federal delegation, encouraging them to support immigration reform, meaningful immigration reform. We also had our executive roundtable, which consists of the top CEOs in Utah Valley. They also sent a letter to our delegation asking them to vote in favor of positive and constructive immigration reform. So the business community in Utah Valley is firmly behind immigration reform, and we want to see something happen. And we're sending the message to our federal delegation that is where we want to be, and that we want them to side with business on this issue and see it as it is. Unfortunately, Dick, in Utah, maybe not in some of the other states you are, we have what's called, well, I should say unfortunately, we have in Utah the caucus system, whereas many of our delegation are a little bit nervous about the delegates who tend to be more conservative. And that seems to be what's keeping a lot of them, from siding with immigration. Your thoughts on that?
I'm familiar with your system. It's produced some very interesting results over the years. And I'm afraid you may be right, Val, that it is inhibiting people from doing what. And by the way, in other parts of the country, that even ones that don't have the caucus and convention system, a lot of folks are worried about primaries and they're looking over their shoulders, worried about members of their own party coming after them. And it's just a shame that we're going to let political considerations, especially when polls of Americans as a whole, even polls of just Republicans, show strong majority support for policies along the lines that your organization and mine support. But the fear is that the people who show up at these, at selection events, however they're done, are going to be even, more conservative and more, and less inclined to be supportive.
It is what it is, and we need to encourage our people out there to let their voices be heard. Those who are passionate about this issue. It is an important issue for economic development, for business, for our country. So, Dick, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate you taking time to share with us some things on this issue.
Thanks for inviting me. I enjoyed the opportunity to chat.
Okay, we appreciate our listeners today. Thanks for joining us. Mark Middlebrook, Logan Wilkes, Dick Castner. It's been a great show, and we'll be back next week with Chamber Matters, the Utah Valley Chamber of Commerce.